What if I told you that one of the biggest environmental wins of the last decade, a move that literally cleaned our air and saved lives, also accidentally hit the accelerator on global warming? Well, today we're going to break down an incredible real-world experiment that you and I were a part of without even knowing it.
Okay, so to get how this all happened, we have to start right here, with this amazing picture of our planet. What you're seeing isn't just weather patterns. Our world is constantly wrapped in this swirling, invisible blanket of tiny little particles. We call them aerosols.
So what exactly is an aerosol? It sounds technical, but it's really just a fancy word for tiny bits of solid stuff or liquid drops hanging out in the air. You see natural ones all the time, like fog or dust kicking up. But critically, they can also be man-made. And this is where it gets really interesting. This incredible visualization from NASA shows that aerosols aren't just one big uniform haze. They've color-coded them, revealing this complex, global dance of different particles coming from totally different places. Let's break down who the main players are here. The red and orange you see floating around, that's smoke from things like wildfires. Those huge tan-colored plumes, like that one streaming off of Africa, that's desert dust from the Sahara. The blue is sea salt, just whipped up from the ocean by the wind. And that green haze, see how it's concentrated over industrial areas and shipping lanes? Those are sulfates, and that's a key type of man-made pollution.
Now, for decades, one of these aerosols, those sulfates, especially from ships, was creating something incredible, an accidental sunshield. It was pollution, yes, but it was also, weirdly enough, helping to keep the planet a little bit cooler.
The effect is actually so powerful you can see it from space. Check this out. Those bright, stringy lines over the ocean are called ship tracks. See, the tiny sulfate particles in a ship's exhaust act like seeds or nuclei for clouds to form around. This makes the clouds way brighter and more reflective. They literally become mirrors, bouncing sunlight right back into space. So for years, we've basically been in this climate tug-of-war. On one side, you have greenhouse gases pulling temperatures up, right? But on the other side, these pollutant aerosols were pulling in the opposite direction, creating a cooling effect that was masking, or hiding, some of that warming. And then, a solution arrived. A huge global regulation designed to clean up all that nasty pollution from the world's shipping fleet. And by every measure, it was a massive win for public health.
In 2020, the International Maritime Organization, or the IMO, rolled out some major new rules. The goal was straightforward and, a really good one. Make ships switch to cleaner, low-sulfur fuel. This would clean up the air and cut down on premature deaths from air pollution, a total no-brainer.
And the results were, well, they were spectacular. Almost instantly, global sulfur oxide emissions from shipping just plummeted. We're talking a staggering 77% drop. It was a clear, undeniable victory for human health.
But in cleaning up all that pollution, we had unknowingly just ripped away our accidental sunshield, and the planet was about to feel the full heat.
Scientists have a pretty intense name for what happened next, a termination shock. Because by getting rid of that cooling effect, we suddenly unmasked the full amount of warming that had been building up underneath it all along. So let's just define that term. A termination shock is what happens when you abruptly stop something that's providing a cooling effect. The temperature doesn't just go back to normal, it jumps up fast as the full force of the warming you've been hiding finally hits. This graph really shows it perfectly. That blue line, that's the cooling effect from aerosols, which had been getting stronger and stronger. But then the 2020 regulations kick in, and that cooling effect gets weaker. Now look at the black line. That's the net warming. You can see it suddenly tick upwards. The warming actually accelerates. And that boost was huge. An analysis from Carbon Brief found it was like adding 2 extra years of all of humanity's greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere, all at once. We didn't just stop cooling the planet, we basically took our foot off the brakes while going downhill. But hold on, because the story gets even weirder. The warming was one thing, but cleaning up the air also had this bizarre immediate effect on the weather itself. Something just started to vanish from the skies. And that something? It was lightning. Yeah, lightning. Over some of the world's busiest shipping lanes, like the South China Sea, the number of lightning strikes dropped by an unbelievable 36%. And this didn't happen over years. It happened almost right away. So, how in the world does cleaner air lead to less lightning? It all comes down to the size of water droplets in clouds. Before 2020, all that ship sulfur acted as seeds for clouds full of countless tiny little droplets. These were so light they got pushed way up to high, freezing altitudes. Up there, they'd smash into each other, creating static charge.
kind of like shuffling your feet on a carpet. More collisions, more charge, meant more lightning. But after 2020, with way fewer sulfur seeds, the clouds started forming with fewer but much larger droplets. These were heavier, so they just rained out before they ever got high enough to do all that colliding. No collisions, no big static charge, the sky literally got quieter.
So you take the accelerated warming, and you add in the vanishing lightning, and it all points to a really difficult truth about the complex planet we live on. It seems we've stumbled into a kind of Faustian bargain with our own climate.
Climatologist James Hansen actually used that exact phrase. The bargain was this. For decades, our air pollution, which was obviously terrible for our health, was also providing a bit of a cooling service. When we rightly decided to get rid of that pollution to save lives, we suddenly had to pay the climate bill that had been coming due all along.
And that's really the core of it. It's this tragic irony. We did something that was unequivocally good for human lungs, and in doing so, we accidentally made the climate crisis that much more immediate and that much more severe.
So that leaves us with this massive question. This whole thing was a global experiment we never meant to run, but it taught us a huge lesson about how deeply interconnected everything is. So as we move forward, trying to fix the problems we've made, how do we navigate this incredibly complex web of consequences to make sure our solutions don't just end up making things worse?